Psalm 73. It's a very interesting psalm, and right at the beginning it tells us that this is a psalm of Asaph. A psalm of Asaph. Okay, now who was he? Who was Asaph? Well, he was a very interesting person. We won't have time to look at all the references, but if you have a paper and pencil, just write these down and you can do some homework when you go home. Alright, a psalm of Asaph. 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 16. The Israeli leadership appointed 3 men to lead the nation of Israel in praise and worship. And Asaph was one of the 3. Alright, so Asaph was a leader of worship. In 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 5, we're told that Asaph was a Levite. So that made him very spiritual in real terms. But he was also the chief of the 3. So they had 3 leaders of worship, and Asaph was number 1. Alright, 1 Chronicles chapter 25, verse 1. David appoints the sons of Asaph and these other 2 people to lead the people in worship, and through their music they were to prophesy. Now, that's a very interesting ministry, especially back in the Old Testament. So the sons of Asaph and these other 2 men were given a ministry of music and song and prophecy. And then in but then he says, therefore pride is their necklace. That's the wicked people. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hard hearts comes iniquity. Evil conceits of their mind know no limits. They scoff, they speak with malice, and in their arrogance they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. And then he says about these wicked people, they say, how can God know? Does the Most High have knowledge? And a lot of wicked people today, that's how they think. I do all this and God does nothing. So I'll keep doing it. And I'll keep doing it again and again, because God is not as great or as big as people think. Is that true? No. It's not true, but there are a lot of people think it is. And Asaph came very close to taking that thought and making it his own. And so God does know. When you're feeling lonely, when you're feeling discouraged, when you want to pack your bag, if you had enough money, you go to the travel agent, buy a ticket and go home. When you're feeling like that, there is an answer. I remember when we first went to Singapore, we stayed in a very conservative theological seminary. And while we were in that seminary, many things went wrong. My son was running around after the rain. He slipped, banged his head, and had to go to hospital. Then he came home, and how old was he? 4. Yeah, he was 4. He climbed the wall, and he got to the top of the wall, and he grabbed a brick, and the brick was loose, and he fell, and the brick dropped on his head. And the doctor said he has to go to hospital. And my wife said, we just brought him home from hospital. I'm a nurse, let me look after him. And the doctor said, okay, one day, if he's no better, he goes to the hospital. And after one day, he was okay. After that, the principal of this seminary came to see us. He said, "You've had so many upsets. We think your family should go in the college bus for a trip to the zoo." So we went to the zoo in the college bus. And in those days, one of the busiest streets in Singapore was what they call Newton Circus. The bus went into Newton Circus, and while he's turning, the back door of the bus flew open, and my daughter, she was 6, she shot out the back door and fell in the middle of the road. And my wife is trying to get out to pick her up, and the driver said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" My wife said, "My kid just fell out." And he stopped, he ran round, he picked her up, pushed her through the window, got back in his car, in the truck, and then went into a side street. And then we looked at our daughter, and right along her back was bruised and a little bit grazed, and she was crying. And we asked her, "Rosalie, what do you want to do? You want to go home or you want to go to the zoo?" And our 6-year-old daughter's crying, "I want to go to the zoo." So we went to the zoo, and my wife, she said, "Wow, if we had enough money, I would say get the ticket and just quit, let's go home." And then after a few hours she said, "No, we're not doing that. We've come because God called us to be here. Whatever is happening to our children is the devil, Satan, is trying to discourage us so that our ministry will never take off." And she said, "No, we're not going. We're going to tell him enough." And sure enough, from that point, our ministry, our kids, everything started to improve.
Amen.
But so many difficulties, and I sympathize. I'm fully aware of how things touch your hearts and your minds when you're so far away from home. A letter comes, a phone call comes, somebody's sick, somebody died, you're here, you can't go. And how many of you have ever thought, how many of you have ever felt, enough is enough, I want to just go home? How many of you ever thought like that? Okay. Join the club.
Come to the club.
This, in verse 12, this is what the wicked are like. Always carefree, always happy, always increasing in wealth. How many of you feel that you never have enough money? Join the club. Ah, dear. Okay. And then, let me read the next verses to you. Yeah, I'm sure some of you have felt like this too. Surely in vain I have tried to keep my heart pure. Surely in vain I wash my hands in innocence. All day long I'm plagued. Every morning I'm punished. And then he says, if I said all of this, if I told you how I really feel, I will have betrayed your children. And then he says, when I try to understand all this, it becomes so oppressive to me. The more I think about it, the more headaches I get. And then, this is the solution. Verse 17. When you go home, write verse 17. Put it in the toilet. Put it in the mirror. Put it somewhere so that every day you see Asaph's solution. All the negativity, all the, oh, woe is me. He said it was so oppressive until I entered the sanctuary of God. Yeah. Who lives in the sanctuary? Who lives there? God. Okay. And Asaph, man with a prophetic ministry, the man who could sing and write songs and worship and lead a whole nation in worship, begins to understand and realize that all the negatives come because he has not been visiting the sanctuary. And I tell you this, you're all, most of you, I think, studying theology. Even while you're studying theology, it's possible to not visit the sanctuary. Do you understand that? You can study theology all day and all night. You can study theology for the rest of your life. But if you don't visit the sanctuary, it will mean very little. Because it's while we're in the sanctuary that God speaks. God speaks to our heart and our spirit in the sanctuary. So Asaph says, oh, it was so awful. I nearly slipped, I nearly fell, I nearly gave up. Until I entered the sanctuary of God, and then I understood that all the wicked people will get their punishment in time. Then he says about the wicked people, surely you place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors, as it is in a dream when one wakes up. So when you arise, O Lord, you will despise them, and they will be to you like a fantasy, like a dream. And then he talks about himself again. And he says, when my heart was grieved, and when my spirit was bitter, I was senseless and ignorant, and like a brute beast before you. And that's how we can become. That's how we can become. When we grieve, when our hearts get bitter, then in the sight of God, and our reaction to God becomes very negative. Why me? What about him? Why not me? Look at him. Why can't I do that? Why can't I have that? And then he says, and this is another addition to the solution, yet I am always with you. I'm always with you. You hold me by my right hand. Yeah. It doesn't say I hold you, but it says you hold me. You guide me with your counsel. How many of you need to know your next step? How many of you worry about your future? Because here it says, you will guide me with your counsel. You will give me good advice. You will actually give me the best advice. And afterwards, you will take me into glory.